Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Chuck Derry. I'm with Gender Violence Institute, and I'll be moderating. But let me just introduce this community of practice idea. The North American Men Engagement Network, NAMEN, this is our second event in this development of an ongoing series of community of practice events. So really the intent of this is to allow membership an opportunity to share their information, share their projects, share lessons learned, and then really get into some deep details as well around tools and procedures and forms and different things that people can use to possibly replicate these initiatives in their own communities or in their own area. We're really looking at how do we engage men and boys, girls and women, transgender and non-gender conforming individuals to reshape and support communities and organizations in the development and implementation of gender justice initiatives directed at ending gender-based violence. So we'll be looking at both interventions, so how do you respond once the harm has occurred? And we're also looking at primary prevention. How do we stop this sexist oppression and violence before it even starts? So we're really pleased to have Humberto Carolo, he's the Managing Director of White Ribbon Canada, and his colleague Kate Bojin, and she's a coordinator of White Ribbon's National Community of Practice, to share their experience today with us around coordinating and engaging boys and men in gender justice issues. So in this session particularly, we've asked Kate and Humberto to really look at their National White Ribbons National Community of Practice initiative and how it was developed, the partnership engagement that they were involved in, 9 separate communities, very diverse communities, what kind of initiatives were implemented in those communities, how did the local context impact the initiatives, and also focusing on this national evaluation framework. So really, this was an evaluation process they engaged in to look at the results across these 9 pilot program communities. And then what their experiences were in exploration of the local context and what was crucial in development of the framework and providing an evaluation resource tool that others can use and replicate. So it's very generous of you as well. Also, they will share information of their impact and promising practices report that they've developed across Canada, and I think they're just at the tail end of finishing up the Made in Canada online toolkit. So you really appreciate both of you sharing the information with us today, because there is loads of information to be shared and very valuable. So again, we will have time for questions and engagement, so we get enough information to really determine, okay, could I do this in my community? Could I do this in my state, in my province, right? And so this is really the intent of these community of practice. So Humberto and Kate, I'm going to hand it off to you, and again, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, NAMEN and all members for inviting us to lead this webinar with you. We're just in the process of sharing our screen. Are you able to see it?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, perfect. So Kate and I are going to take turns through the presentation. So again, thanks for the invitation and for thinking of us. And it's always awesome to collaborate with all of you within NAMEN and beyond. As most of you, I'm not going to, since most of you know about White Ribbon, we're not going to spend too much time talking about the organization itself, other than to say that we've been around since 1991, and we focus on engaging men and boys in ending violence against women and promoting healthy relationships, healthy masculinities, and gender equality. And we do that at many levels, locally, nationally, regionally, and internationally as well. So programs focus on everything from capacity building with educators and service providers to research, resource development, to network building and collaboration, and frontline delivery of programs and engagements with youth, and then a whole lot of work at the global level as well. So here's some objectives for today's webinar from our point of view. So we really want to share with you our experience with the National Community of Practice here in Canada, and then we want to spend some time reviewing the National Evaluation Framework, which was one of the key deliverables in this project, and then also to share with you some challenges and the lessons that we learned along the way. And we really think that this will be helpful as NAMEN thinks further through the development of its own community of practice. So we want to respectfully acknowledge the contribution of all the community partners that worked alongside with us in this project. There were 9 of them. These were organizations across Canada that were funded by our federal government through the Status of Women Canada agency. And so they are the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, the Broadway Neighborhood Center in Winnipeg, the Students' Commission of Canada, Changing Ways in London, Ontario, Chrysalis House, Les Essentiels, Nova Vita, and Actitudes Inuit Women of Canada, and CAFI. So our thanks to the partner organizations and to the funder for working with us and supporting us in this project. So just before we get into the actual community of practice and how it works, a little bit about our thinking in terms of the need for a community of practice and why this was important for us when we first started working on this 3 years ago. So first of all, we know that this work can feel lonely at times. There's only a few organizations in Canada and certainly not around the globe. So our sector is still pretty limited in terms of organizations working specifically on engaging men and boys. Projects are primarily time limited. They're small in scale. And so that we saw this as an opportunity to bring together this group of organizations who were funded by the government of Canada to engage in work with men and boys. We also wanted to share some of the learnings and the knowledge and best practices that we have developed and come across along the way in our history with these organizations, some of which were relatively new in engaging men and boys. So we thought that it would be good to do that for a community of practice. And also we wanted, just like we've done with NAMEN, to bring us all together to share knowledge and models and such. We thought it would be important for the funded organizations to have a similar space in Canada for that to happen. And then we also we saw an opportunity because all the projects required an evaluation framework. So we saw an opportunity to look at or to develop a national evaluation framework that looked at the outcomes and the indicators of each project and try to bring them all together to demonstrate impact at a larger scale, right? Because often when these evaluation results remain with individual organizations and individual projects, it's hard to demonstrate impact just beyond that particular community. So we saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate impact at a larger scale. Is everybody able to follow and hear us properly so far?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
Good, good. I'm glad our sound wasn't too great at the beginning, so it's good to know. Okay, so like I said earlier, this project began in October 2013, so we're just in the process of wrapping it up. It was 3 years in length. And White Ribbon served as the coordinator for the National Community of Practice. And these are the organizations, again, that participated, that were members of the COP. And here's where they came from. As you see, they're pretty well distributed, all the way from the Yellowknife in the Yukon to Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, which has members spread out throughout Alberta, Winnipeg and Manitoba, and then Ottawa, Ontario, London, Bradford, and Toronto, and then a couple of organizations from the East Coast as well. One key gap here was the lack of a francophone organization from Quebec, but a couple of the organizations involved also provided services to francophone communities in those regions. So here's the objectives for our community of practice. So to foster innovation, provide a space for learning and sharing, to share promising practices, and to keep up with challenges and gaps that organizations were experiencing in the delivery of their projects along the way. And the other one was the collaborative development of the evaluation framework, an online toolkit for engaging boys and young men in gender-based violence prevention. So this was really a collaborative development process, and then we'll talk about that a bit more later on. Then to also address capacity building needs for those organizations. So along the way, we had an opportunity to provide time and space for each organization to share their areas of expertise. And to profile and highlight some of the innovation in programs that were being implemented across the country from the perspective of each organization. And finally, to encourage the broad dissemination of our collaborative work and resources development. Here's some of our values. These were established very early on. Again, in a collaborative way, everybody contributed. So first and foremost, to acknowledge the accomplishments and continue to work by leading women activists and women's organizations. So to really understand and value the fact that the work with men and boys wouldn't be possible today without the efforts, the struggles, and the activism of the early leaders in this movement, women, and organizations, women's organizations in particular. We really wanted to hone in on the partnership and collaborative aspects of the project and really promote that in every possible way. Inclusive practice as well, and value the diversity of our membership, regional and also cultural diversity, and to promote intersectionality in our work. And so Kate is going to take over from here.
Great, thanks, Humberto.
So, can I ask you a quick question on this? Tell me about why particularly you had shared values up here. Why did you have that as a foundation upon which you needed to work?
Yeah, I think that was a really critical starting point, actually, because we had such kind of a diverse membership base and different kinds of organizations that, coming together on developing shared values can really be a great foundation for going forward. And I think it's around building accountability too, and making sure we're being clear about our politics and values. So we identified those in our terms of reference as well. But I think for any COP development, it's a critical piece. I don't know, yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Great. So kind of delving more into the different phases. So I think we could think about it in 4 different phases across the 3-year initiative. So really the first 4 months were kind of the pre-planning stage and initiating relationships with these 9 project partners. White Ribbon had existing relationships with some organizations, but not all. So it was important that we prioritize that with new partners. So really, the regular kind of stuff, project startup. So we had our funding confirmed through Status of Women Canada. I was brought on board as coordinator for this COP. We got started on some terms of reference that would really provide a strong foundation for us in going forward with timelines and activities. And then I thought, I'm an academic at heart too. I really wanted to do a literature review on kind of different models of communities of practice. So I carried that out in the vein of different pieces we could really adapt and use. We then created a brief online needs assessment, which I sent out to all of the 9 organizations to kind of gauge what their existing capacity and expertise was on male engagement specifically. And so what we found was really a wide range of comfort level and expertise. So that was something for us to consider going forward. Then really the next 8 months was really around fostering those relationships with our partners. So I was able to meet with all of our 9 partners across Canada. So it was really fast and furious first year and a bit. But and our approach there was really to hear what they would want from the community practice, share our objectives, be there to answer any questions in person. But that face time was really important. Then kind of delving into, upon, fostering these relationships, going into the project deliverables. So really delving into the development of the evaluation framework, and then conducting another round of in-person site visits with our partners on if they have any further feedback on it and insights. And our other major deliverable around the toolkit development. So I've been working with all of our project partners to really highlight the innovative work that's been happening in the last couple of years across Canada. So we are very close to finalizing that toolkit. And I'm excited to share that with everyone very soon. And then we're currently in the stage of the evaluation. I've conducted 3 interviews with our project partners on strengths of the COP, some gaps, really kind of gauging their insights and participation. And then of course the project reporting, finishing that. So that's kind of just a really kind of top level across different phases of the COP initiative.
So Kate,
Yeah.
how often did you do site visits?
So I did 2 rounds of nationwide travel.
So it was two on-site visits for this project?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, very good. Great.
So in terms of our membership, obviously communities of practices can really vary in terms of their membership. Our initiative really was a closed network, so we were mandated to work with those 9 organizations specifically who obtained funding through Status of Women Canada. So we thought it would be wise to kind of create different membership streams. So this might be interesting for NAMEN as you think about your different membership. So we wanted to really have kind of an active model. So we wanted partners to be active members. And then White Ribbon was the COP facilitator. And then of course, our funder, Status of Women, played more as an advisory role. So we keep them in the loop for different deliverables and major goings on. So 3 kind of major membership streams for us. So this is what we did. We had quarterly web conferences across the 3 years. So I thought I would give you kind of an idea of our agenda most times. So we do a nationwide check-in. We would have a presentation by a COP member organization on their model or whatever they think is compelling to present to the group. We then do a COP project update from White Ribbon, have a discussion, and then share kind of any events and opportunities. So we just kind of stick to that agenda pretty consistently throughout the years. And of course was flexible for any kind of adaptation or different content people wanted to go over. So we use Group Spaces as an online platform. So we have probably close to 100 male engagement resources up there now, different research publications, tools. And then of course the in-person site visits, which I spoke to, and then really providing feedback and contributing to our deliverables was probably a major source of people's time, I would say. And then of course, White Ribbon, we were the main liaison with all 9 project partners. So trying to connect people with similar challenges, or find a tool that would be helpful. I would do that. So really to be that catalyst to address any burning questions or seeking new resources. And then, of course, we had a newsletter, and I did some social media as well. Great. So our approach, we really wanted to build excitement, build buy-in across our partners. So we really wanted a shared leadership model. This is not a top-down, White Ribbon-led initiative. So we, joint ownership of all project outputs, including the evaluation framework and toolkit. And we really were flexible in however organizations wanted to participate. That was a really important feature of the COP. And then again, just doing a solid lit review on existing models and creating our terms of reference. Great. So moving towards some of the objectives of the evaluation framework. So again, co-creation, collaborative process, really throughout its development. We wanted to challenge the more top-down approach to these kinds of publications. So we really, this was applied to evaluation data across the 9 projects to kind of get a sense of some shared results. And of course to inform our impact and promising practices report and online toolkit. So just in terms of the document itself, we think it's really unique and exciting. It's not just a framework, it kind of elaborates on some guiding principles. We think it really kind of offers a wide range of application and is pretty user-friendly for those at various kind of experience levels at engaging men and boys. It talks about the importance of context in the local community for any sort of evaluation plan and process. Goes into some enabling factors and issues of sustainability, importance of process and community readiness to take on these issues, and also goes into some limitations. In the end, it is just a tool. It needs to be a part of a bigger picture. So some yeah.
Excuse me. What do you mean by it needs to be part of a bigger picture?
Yeah. So I think it needs to kind of go hand in hand with broader kind of strategic objectives, and really does only represent a moment in time as well. So yeah, I think we have to be careful of how much emphasis we place on a specific tool and
Okay, great, thanks.
And of course, we have the 8 outcome areas that are elaborated on. in the evaluation framework. And based on kind of what we've seen for how our partners ran with this tool and used it, really the first 4 outcome areas were very strongly represented in folks' programs. And I think that had to do with really the initial objectives that were set out in the programs. So awareness raising, knowledge and understanding, attitudinal change, skill development. Skill development a little less so, but those were really the main focus areas for reporting for our partners, as well as partnerships and coalition building. That was again mandated in many ways by the government as well, but obviously very crucial for this kind of work. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, so and you'll recognize these obviously these outcome areas are inspired by the spectrum of prevention as well. Right? So here they are, the 4 areas that levels of change that we developed, again inspired by the spectrum of prevention. So we wanted to look at those outcome areas across the community level, the organizational level, the social level, and individual. So individual is pretty straightforward, right? We're talking about individual knowledge, behavior, skills, advocacy. And then social it has to do more with peer groups. So thinking about like sports teams or other type of similar men's groups, for example. Organizational is more like the type of change that happens at that level, the policy change, the strategic planning, the team building, the skills of the organization to do this work. And then at the community level, so that's where advocacy, broad-based advocacy would take place. So just as an example, looking at one of the particular outcome areas. So this is how it works within the National Evaluation Framework. So the outcome area number 7 deals with partnerships and coalition building. So two particular outcomes were identified for that: to increase collective action among men and men's groups with women's organizations towards the prevention of violence against women and girls, and increase support for a diversity of partners, for example, the private sector, non-profits, academic. And then the indicators are listed along those 2 rows. So as an example, within the community capacity, the indicator there is the number of collective efforts addressing gender-based violence in collaboration with women's organizations, and percentage of partners agreeing that engaging men and boys in gender-based violence prevention efforts is important. So this is overly technical, obviously, and it makes sense in the context of specific projects. This evaluation framework is it's presented in a way that can either be sort of incorporated as a whole into the planning for a particular project, or you can look at where your project fits in within these particular outcome areas, and then pick and choose the indicators that you think would be relevant to the kind of activities that you're implementing. And obviously, we're only providing a very brief highlight of this framework. The NEF is available on our website. It's a fulsome document, so you're welcome to download it and to go into more detail. And please do get in touch with us if you have any questions, or if we can support you anyway in terms of incorporating that framework into the work that you're doing.
So Humberto, are you saying that people could use this and edit it and make it work for in their locations?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
Absolutely. So it's already happening. We just last week we learned of a community-based organization that has that is applying the framework, and as usual, just provide credit to the organizations involved, and we're good, because this is exactly what it was meant for, right? We wanted to create this kind of evaluation tool that could be easily used by other organizations interested in doing this kind of work.
That's great.
As a means to strengthen capacity in the sector overall.
That's great, Humberto. We're some of the sound is getting got a little bit funky there, but I think we caught most of what you were saying there.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. And if you need me to repeat anything at some point, let me know. Okay, so now we're going to get into the lessons learned from the community of practice. So obviously there were certain limitations. We had a lot of interest from other organizations that were not funded by Status of Women Canada, and because of the limitations in funding and just in terms of the scope of what we could do, it was closed in this particular case. So we have a different, oh, there we go, okay. Sorry, let me go back to the other one. I got it really confused here. The resource question was significant in this case, and this is something that I've already shared in our preliminary discussions within NAMEN as a recommendation for our own community of practice, is that a lot of these organizations have limited funds. They have a small team of individuals carrying out programming, and it's difficult for organizations to commit to both carrying frontline work and then providing their staff with time to participate in this kind of networking and collaboration. So that's something to be kept in mind, and it's a resource question that needs to be addressed right from the get-go. So when a proposal is being developed, it's recommended that the members of the COP be properly resourced to participate, because that increases buy-in, it increases accessibility, representation, and all of that. So it serves multiple purposes. And then we're recommending that a certain percentage be dedicated to the participation of women's shelters and organizations, again, due to the under-resourced nature of the work of these organizations, and the accessibility and representation and accountability as well factors. So we would have loved to have more in-person meetings. We would have loved to have the opportunity to bring the members of the community of practice together in person. There were just the funds to do that, for us to be able to do that, were just not there. But so that was a lesson that we learned, and that if we were to do it again, I think we would be much more forthcoming with a funder. This was a funder limitation, so we had the interest in doing this from the get-go, but the funder did not
Humberto,
agree to it. So, but now we see that it could have come together. Yeah.
could you try repeating that? We didn't quite get the audio.
Okay.
It was distorted. Audio was distorted for some reason.
Okay. So the opportunity to bring, is it better now?
Yes, yes.
So we really missed out on the opportunity to bring together in person the members of the community of practice, and this was due to a funding limitation that was that came from the funder, and so we really missed out on that opportunity. And if we were to do it all again, we would have been more forthcoming with the funder, and would have insisted on on including that opportunity. So just as within NAMEN, and we've seen the benefits of when we all have a chance to come together and to plan and to look at future directions and such. That kind of benefit and opportunity is significant, and it should be considered in a community of practice as well. So there's a gap in gaining positive support from senior management initially, to the extent of participation from project managers. So we had a bit of a technical glitch in this project because White Ribbon started its community of practice project about 6 months after the individual projects had started. And so the way that it was communicated with the participating organizations kind of left them feeling that it was an add-on to their funding requirements. And so it took quite a bit of time and effort on Kate's part to really work with the senior management of these organizations to help them understand what we were trying to accomplish with the community of practice and to get their buy-in and participate. And in the end, Kate was very successful with that.
You know, one of the things that I'm noticing, if you go back to that previous screen, Humberto, just for a minute, is you were talking about using the primary spectrum of prevention, right? And looking at the socio-ecological model. And I'm noticing in your first bullet that you have institutionalized these this concept of accountability, and so that the words that you are using are put into practice. When you say 25% of your budget goes to the participation of women's shelters and organizations. So I really like that you're a great model of this primary prevention, where you're really looking at organizational practice change to change social norms and this community of practice. So that's a great example. Absolutely.
Thank you. So I already mentioned the first point here. We would also recommend a organizational needs assessment versus individual asset mapping. I think that would be much more comprehensive and would allow us to better understanding the gaps and opportunities versus just looking at what's out there. The amount of time that's required and the staffing is important in the administration and coordination of communities of practice. In our case, we were really fortunate to have Kate with her level of experience and knowledge in this area of work, but not all organizations had the fortune to be able to we're not as fortunate to be able to dedicate a full-time staff position to the coordination of their projects as well. It's important that we had very specific deliverables and timelines and budget lines and such. So we came up with a healthy balance between staying true to what we promised to the funder, and then sort of realigning, being flexible, responding to needs as they emerged. And so we really had to employ that throughout this project in order to strengthen the relationship, to build trust, and to, again, increase access to participation for organizations, because we were not all on the same page or worked at the same pace or had the same resources to be able to contribute in the manner and time and capacity that we needed. And then to encourage individual members to bring forward their leadership, their capacity, and their skills, and to share that expertise and that leadership with a community of practice. So it was very collaborative, and in the end, the 5 of the members presented specific capacity building workshops and presentations to the community of practice. And we wish we had time and an opportunity for more.
Thanks. Great. So now kind of exploring some of the challenges that we experience across this 3-year initiative. So, you know, breadth versus depth. So during our quarterly web calls, we really, just because of the number of folks on the phone, we could really only do more of a surface dialogue on where people are at with their projects, you know, maybe a concrete challenge, but it was hard to really kind of have a deeper dialogue just within that format. You know, so we spoke to kind of in-person, the value of in-person meetings. That could be a forum where we could have really got more into depth on programs. So I think one strategy is, you know, offering additional opportunities for collaboration. I can share that I spoke with one of our partners on the interview that they conducted on the COP, and she mentioned, you know, why not have kind of a buddy system, like a matching of practitioners where you can kind of turn to that person, go into maybe something in more depth. So that's just one example of a process we could have done. Another challenge was, again, everyone was at a really different place with their own understandings of toxic masculinities, gender-based violence prevention, strength-based models. So we really had to be cognizant of that, and you know, trying to really grow together when everyone's kind of at different levels was a bit challenging. But I think one strategy could be just offering more capacity development opportunities for specific organizations. Some other core challenges. Obviously, we had you know, kind of inconsistent participation across all COP members, but that was really due to a lack of resources and not intention, or so there was strong desire to participate, just it became difficult because of lack of resources. So, you know, our strategy again was just flexible membership and participation. We would offer, you know, kind of 2 to 3 month timelines for providing feedback and insights on deliverables. So, you know, very, very flexible for participation. And then another challenge that we had to navigate was around staff turnover. So, you know, I think I experienced close to 12 turnovers, both at senior management and project staff levels as well. So that was a matter of me really keeping, tracking an engagement spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. I'd be happy to share it with you too. But really kind of gauging, okay, who do I need to connect with who's new, sharing documents and terms of reference, doing an intro call. So I had to really kind of navigate that throughout the 2.5 years. But again, with that, you also get new energy and you know, kind of a new flavor for participation. So great. Well, that's it for the challenges. So just wanted to kind of open it up to the group.
This is Craig. There are a few questions on the chat. Chad asked if you have any plans to expand the membership stream, what the near future looks like. Stephen asked, would group spaces be useful for NAMEN's community practice? And that sounds like an online tool. And then the next question that was on the chat was what meeting methods seem to be the most productive, face-to-face, web conferences and other. Was there an approach that seemed to be most productive?
I'll start with the plans to expand the membership.
Yep.
So because this community of practice was was associated with a funding, like with a call for proposals in a particular funding stream. It technically is coming to an end now, but we're, as part of our project wrap up and evaluation and analysis, we're looking at what else could we do to sustain the community of practice, and what future iterations it could take. Our government is currently looking at developing a federal plan to address gender-based violence. So we're hoping that we're going to do a little bit of waiting as well to see what kinds of priorities come out through that plan, and see what kinds of opportunities there are to build on this work and to establish a more sustainable and long-term community of practice in Canada.
If I could just ask a follow-up question. Was the intent of the funding to seed a community of practice, or was it just to kind of analyze the process of developing a community of practice?
Well, it was both. Primarily to provide a space and an opportunity for funded organizations to come together and to share and to build this joint evaluation framework, but to provide the beginnings of a more long-term community of practice, because there was no such thing in Canada. We have some local, provincial, territorial types of networks that are focused on, for example, shelters or on sexual violence prevention, supporting survivors, but nothing that's focused on primary prevention and engaging that voice. So yeah, we're looking for looking at the sustainability question right now, and see what, because for us it's a resource issue as well. It takes funds to continue to do this kind of work, and so we need to explore that.
Then looking on the chat here, with group spaces be useful for NAMEN. From my experience, it was really great. It's an easy way to share tools and resources. There's a group discussion piece. So from my experience, it was a great tool. So you can just look that up online. There's lots of information on group spaces.
And also what I would say is that Wild Apricot may serve that purpose, so we should explore that tool further. We already have a membership. Now I'm putting on my NAMEN hat. I am saying we as in NAMEN. So I think we can look at that a little bit closer and see if it could fit or fill the same kind of needs that group spaces fills.
So it has more capabilities than Zoom does, in other words?
Group spaces is comparable to Wild Apricot. I would say Wild Apricot is even more robust in that it includes a membership database, it includes communications, it includes payment facilities. Okay. So I think we have the same kind of tools within Wild Apricot, and we should explore that further if that's an interest for the NAMEN community.
Great. And then I'm losing some of the chat stuff here. Debbie has to go, it looks like. Thank you, Debbie. What was the other one here that we're looking at?
Oh, I said thank you while I was muted. Bye, darling.
Thank you, Debbie.
Bye, Debbie. Thank you. So what meeting methods seem to be most productive? Face-to-face, web conferences, calls, others? Combination of both, all of them? What worked for you?
Yeah, I think our in-person meetings with project partners was definitely the most meaningful. But again, our partners didn't have the opportunity to meet each other. So White Ribbon was able to build those individual relationships with organizations, and that was really critical and important. But I think web conferences were great at, kind of seeing where people were at, being able to connect on, particular challenge we're having or success. So yeah, I think it's a mix of different methods. It kind of depends on what you want to get out of the communication.
Good point. I wonder about, so one of the things that was interesting to me was your principles around collaborative leadership, right? Not top-down white ribbon thing, but collaborating with all these communities, and how the fact that you had differing levels of understanding around male socialization and toxic masculinities and gender-based violence. How did those two come together? The shared leadership, collaborative leadership, and then but differing understandings of the issue. Was that fairly messy?
It was at times messy. So, for example, we kind of, in identifying the shared values, we, discussed using the term pro-feminist men's organizing, and, wanted to be clear about, the political nature of this work, right? And so there were some that really weren't comfortable with it, some that were, and at the end of the day, we landed on, these terms of reference are for us. So let's go with pro-feminist men's organizing, and but it was a bit of a challenge, but I think this is where growth happens, and how we can support each other as practitioners as well. And the COP was really to get at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have kind of a related question, if it's okay to jump in here. I'm really interested in that same conversation, but around the outcomes that you developed. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about kind of the nuts and bolts of the process you use to identify outcomes and indicators across your really diverse programs. And how did you tackle that?
Sure. So more of the development of the evaluation framework. Great. So we initially did a literature review, working with some evaluation consultants here as well. So looking at how this work is being evaluated currently. So that's also on our website. So we did our literature review. We then looked at all of the existing evaluation plans and frameworks across our 9 partners. And then gave that to our evaluation consultant and said kind of, okay, this is where folks are at and they're thinking and planning. And then a first draft was developed based on those different frameworks. And then we had, I would say, 12 rounds of revisions on the tool, and really kind of a rewrite as well of how to make this accessible.
Yeah, and I would also add that we were lucky that the funder, first of all, required every project to include an evaluation, provided some funds for that said evaluation, which often, both of those conditions are missing from funding frameworks. And also the funder provided some common outcomes that they expected out of all the projects, which was really interesting. And we, White Ribbon, was fortunate that we were able to provide inputs to the funder prior to their development of that call for proposal. So we made some suggestions in terms of the kinds of outcomes that are sort of commonly understood in our area of work to engage men and boys. So that's something that was considered from the get-go by funder and by all the organizations. So when we came on board to look at the existing outcomes, we found a lot of commonalities amongst all the funded organizations.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Humberto and Kate, are you willing to share about the levels of funding we're talking about for each of the participants? Was it as much as a staff person or something much less? You all still hooked up?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? The
Are you able to hear us, Humberto? Your connection is a little weak.
Clear.
Can you hear me?
I'll ask the question in
Humberto?
chat. How's that? I'll chat it and you can take it from there.
Humberto and Kate, are you still with us? We may have lost them. Can't hear you, Craig.
Yeah, I turned off my mic. I was just typing the question.
Okay, very good. And I'm sure Humberto and Kate will rejoin here. Hopefully they're, oh, perhaps they're back on now. Just coming in.
I don't know if you can hear us. I think there's some.
Just barely kind of in and out, Humberto. We cannot hear you now. Your name is on my screen. So I was curious.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the question here, what level of funding was provided to your COP members as much as a staff person, more or less? So this
That's too bad.
From member to member. Some organizations got a full-time equivalent when to be divvied up, right? So depending on the resources, depending on how well the resources, some of them were able to dedicate the full, and others had to kind of divide the funding between the project manager and the, for example, executive director, because in some cases that's all that organization had.
Well, we lost a substantial amount of what you had mentioned, Humberto. We did hear the last part of what you said regarding some of it had to be shared because some of these programs had very low financial capacities, right? And others were, is it true that others were able to hire someone specific to this project? Was there enough money to do that for some of the programs?
Yes. So the funder provided staffing funds. So each project had a budget line for staffing. But depending on how well the organization was resourced, some organizations were able to, for example, use all of those funds to hire a project manager for their project, while others had to divide those funds between a project manager and, for example, covering their portion of the executive director, because that's all they had.
How did you manage all these differences in all these different 9 pilot communities as coordinating body? How did you do that internally? I mean, and externally? How did you manage all this?
Well, I would say it's a combination of a lot of patience, a lot of recognition of the different levels that organizations are resourced to do this work, and therefore a great deal of understanding on our part if members were not able to, for example, provide the level of inputs and contributes within the time frame that we required. A lot of flexibility. We did our own rejigging of our budget lines, and we shared some of our funds with the organizations to help them increase their their participation. We reduced the amount of traveling that we had planned in order to do that. So we redistributed the resources, and then we worked with, you know, what we within the confines of what we had. So we were very responsive. Again, flexibility was key, and you know, Kate's amazing relationship building and follow up individually with organizations, a lot of phone calling and individual relationship building. All of those things were important to address that kind of diversity and to address the resource scarcity issue.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think there's also just a coordination element too. So I wanted to make sure I was in the know of everyone's projects across the board. So I'd have a pretty thorough kind of Excel spreadsheet where, you know, I would try and look at commonalities of target participants and where folks are at. So it was a great deal of background and research and yeah, just tracking throughout as well. But I think the diversity really made it a stronger COP, and yeah.
And when you say diversity, what do you mean by that term?
Yeah, I think just the different program models, target participants, so from Indigenous young men participating in Winnipeg to you know, communities in Whitehorse to, you know, Francophone newcomer communities in New Brunswick.
Wow.
So it's just an incredible, you know, scope of folks participating in projects, which I think really excited our COP members just to see the wide scope of work.
And also, I would say diversity in the sense of resources, right? Some of these organizations were very small, very local, very, you know, some of them had 2 staff members, as an example, right? So diversity in the sense of resources too.
If you did this again with the same amount of funding, would you reduce the number of communities you did it with, or would you do the same again? Like, would you go to 6 communities instead of 9, or would you just go, no, I'd do the same thing?
It's hard to say. My gut instinct would be to add even more, like to open it up for even more participants, and then to follow on the recommendation to have different levels of membership and to engage people in different ways, right? So maybe it's a smaller group that works on the evaluation framework, and maybe it's another smaller group that works on the toolkits, and you know, so I would look for opportunities to diversify even further.
Oh, really?
Very, very deliberate in terms of how they're engaged.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I've got a question. How much argument was there about what the objectives or the evaluation questions were going to be, or what I know that you said some outcome measures were brought in by the funder, but were people arguing about what the priorities were because the priorities were different or whatnot? I mean, where were the arguments? I guess I'm curious. If you're willing to share.
I don't think there were many arguments, and folks were pretty understanding of, you know, what works in my community won't necessarily work in yours. So there was definitely a respect there.
Yeah, and also the way that we built this framework is like I said earlier, it's like a menu, right? Yeah. So no one project included all of those outcomes and all of those indicators. So the framework is really like a an amalgamation of everybody's outcomes and indicators. So as long as people felt like theirs were included in the framework, then it was okay. So everybody had a piece to contribute to it. Does that make sense? So that's not where, you know, our arguments took place. I think that the areas where we ran into challenges was, again, I think at the beginning, like agreeing on those shared values, right, on the terms of reference. So there was a lot of back and forth, but it's all good. Like it wasn't conflict based. It was more, you know, there's a lot of different thoughts and different ways of you know, thinking about these issues, and so then it's a matter of kind of facilitating, finding common ground amongst everybody, right?
No.
Were you sussing out any differences in cultural frameworks? Like people had different cultural starting points?
Yeah,
In ways?
absolutely. Yeah, that was a big piece. And we have one organization, one Indigenous focused organization, Paktutiik Inuit Women of Canada. So meeting with them in the first year was just so incredible to learn about kind of the multiple layers of trauma that Inuit men, women, and girls are facing, and just the historical context and how that shapes their approach, their very unique approach, and there's 6 principles that they work with. Yeah, so I think for White Ribbon, that was just so incredible for us to deepen our understanding of specific communities and their challenges.
And that was one organization that had significant challenges in participation and resources. So that is a gap in our community of practice and in our tools, as well as that I wish there was stronger representation of Indigenous perspectives and understanding in the different tools that we developed.
So they're one of the groups that was underfunded?
Absolutely. So they're Inuit organizations. So they represent Indigenous populations in the north of Canada, primarily expensive territory. Yeah. You know, and one of, I think, 6 national Indigenous organizations, and with you know, tremendous underfunding. I think the team was 2 or 3 people in total for the organization. So again, perfect example of that challenge, you know, and then it had an impact on our ability to be completely intersectional in the case of Indigenous perspectives and accessibility as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear more about, you mentioned that the one Indigenous organization had principles. I'm wondering if that's also something you included in your kind of evaluation framework, and feel free to go tell me to do my homework and read the framework again, but I'm wondering to what extent the project surfaced kind of shared or unique principles of programming implementation in addition to the kind of change outcomes that you then tried to assess or that were useful to across programs. And does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think this could really be adapted to the questions that the communities are based on. So I think we speak a little bit about just where the context is and really positioning the framework, but I do think it falls short in terms of specific Indigenous indicators and outcomes and what have you. So this is more for adaptation by mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Much differences between the East Coast and the Prairie?
Oh yeah.
Is that fairly?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, even in the projects themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like the activities and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I learned that travel in February in the East Coast is maybe not the best idea, but yeah, much more of like a strong community development perspective and commitment in the East Coast that emerged there.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the projects tended to be small in scale but deeper.
Yeah.
So they tended to work with like groups of men on a longer term, whereas the projects in the prairies tended to be like farther reaching. So the one in Alberta was like working with workplaces and with sports and in different locations throughout the province. The project in Winnipeg in Manitoba had to do with urban youth, so again reaching far and wide into that population. Also with a significant Indigenous youth population there too, using art and music. Yeah, so and the other project in the East Coast had to do with supporting newcomer communities, so immigrant and refugee communities in the East Coast. So it included that dimension as well. Now, Students Commission of Canada also had an initiative in the East Coast working with incarcerated youth. So again, going more in depth with groups of youth in the justice system over a long period of time. There's some really great lessons learned from that experience.
And these different projects are available on your website. If we wanted to look and see what they do in Nova Scotia, what they do in Winnipeg, what they do in the Yukon, that's on your website. We could see that.
Yeah, so that's going to be featured in the toolkit.
Okay.
We're launching that next week. So you can check out, each organization has their own case study. So all the info is there, the tools they've created, resources, that's all profiled. And then everyone's contact information across the different programs.
That's great. And the TORs and needs assessment, evaluation, is that all those tools available as well?
I'd be happy
that you created?
I'd be happy to share the terms of reference, the initial needs assessment questionnaire. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Wow, that's great. That's really great. How about others? Other questions or comments about this?
Hi, this is Stephen. I was wondering if you see a role for NAMEN in the future of this community of practice.
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at, again, we NAMEN, we're looking at developing our own, right? So in this webinar is part of that too. Totally. I think that, we at White Ribbon, we're interested in reaching out to more and more Canadian-based organizations and inviting them to participate within NAMEN as well. So that would be, we would be happy to extend the invitation to the COP members to join NAMEN and continue that kind of collaboration within its COP. But again, what we're going to find the same kind of challenges around resourcing and participation that we're already seeing in NAMEN. Canadian-based organizations are not, but yeah, we'd be happy to make those links.
For me, some of the biggest challenge in doing this is the depth versus breadth piece, right? Which is kind of what we're trying to sort out here as we go forward is how do we get into the depth of some of these key pieces. I think some of the questions you're asking, Aaron, is really going there, right? Around just how did you develop this? How did you come with these outcomes? And others have mentioned, how did you work these outcomes out with others with different understandings of or different needs, So it is, I think that's the biggest challenge on this kind of a environment of exchange.
And I would love to hear, maybe how people felt the value benefits were to them to participate. What they feel they want to continue doing now that it's ending. What would they want to continue doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really our approach throughout the project of, having this being a mutually beneficial process. So, building leadership capacity and what are folks interested in learning about, and, reaching out to different speakers to address it. Yeah. We're kind of thinking it through of what it could look like going forward. And again, I think it's a resource question. But on an immediate basis, I'm creating just a Google Drive of everyone's resources and publications, and sharing that with everyone, making sure we have each other's contacts. And I think we do have some strong interest from a couple organizations for going forward. It's just a matter of, again, the resources and objectives, and the scope. How to do, does it make more sense to have a locally based COP or broaden? Again, goes back to the objectives, right, of what people want to accomplish. So we'll see. We'll see. Right. And I think with the launch of the toolkit next week, right. We'll see that go far and wide, and maybe some new ideas generated from the sector.
That's great.
I'm just noticing one person on our conferences doesn't have a video. Is that you, Rob Oken, by any chance?
Yeah, my Zoom lost its Zoom.
Do you have any questions you want to throw in?
This has been fascinating, but I feel a little bit challenged by not having the visuals. But I'm good, and I'm really appreciative of how this seems to be something that NAMEN can do, and broadcast and keep these kinds of conversations going, so we can, both be understanding what others are doing and then making it available. I mean, this is a great use of our service.
And Rob, we can send you the PowerPoint if we'll send that to you for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know how it went down. I used it recently, no problem. So I would have liked to have seen all of your smiling faces.
Well, hopefully you can look at the recording and check us out that way.
You'll see how we all smiled when you said, nice to see your smiling faces, and we all smiled. Right. So there you go. The other thing that's interesting about this process, and learning from your experiences and our collective experiences, is that as we attempt to grow this community of practice, and figure out the structure and the processes of doing that, this same thing is happening on the global level. Men Engage Global Alliance is actually working with all the networks. So South America, South Asia, Africa, Europe, MENA, Middle East, Northern Africa, to look at how they can do this kind of community practice as well. And again, increase our capacities to actually move this into our communities and into our areas of work, and engage others in this process. So I think this is really useful in this beginning of this process of doing this and trying to sort out what works and what's effective. And some of that goes to some of what you're talking about, Stephen, too, about some kind of evaluation and some kind of discussion about what worked, what doesn't work, and how do we make this engaging and really useful for people.
Yeah, I think this is a really valuable, I echo what Rob said, it's so valuable to be able to interact with each other. And there is something about seeing each other's faces that I think helps to build the community part of community of practice. And I'm curious if when you did your quarterly meetings, were you doing video conferencing? That's a question.
yeah, not everyone has here there. But yeah, it wasn't for all members. Yeah, people have different kind of familiarity with tech and yeah.
I guess I'm thinking that it makes a difference, and I'm curious about that. You know, whether it really does in terms of building something that is sustainable and feeds us in terms of the kind of connection that we tend to look for in that community of practice environment.
No, good question. So I'm aware of time, and we have about a minute left, and just wanted to open up for any last questions or comments from anyone before we close out the session.
I just wanted to reflect on my experience actually with this web conference, which has been great. My concept of a community of practice is pretty distinct from my concept of an implementation of practice. And it sounds like, I only slowly realized over the course of the conference that you were actually doing both. And so I think that it would be interesting to see if other people have that same distinction as you kind of roll out your toolkit and as you roll out the concept, because a community of practice is, the way I conceptualize it is really, a collaborative communication between people who are doing their own practices in other places, and it sounds like you're fostering both. And so, so people like me, I guess, might, have different expectations of what they're going to be engaging in or learning about when you tell them that you're going to talk to them about a community of practice. And so I think that, might just be interesting for you to know, since your use of the phrase community of practice is a little different than I think some people's experience of it.
Do you mind, just because of time now, Chad, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. Could you send me something or send us something about how you define those differences? Because I haven't heard that before, so that's very interesting.
Sure. Well, community of practice is a sociologically studied thing in workplace sociology. And so, so there's actually several good books about community of practice. And actually Prevent Connect the model for Prevent Connect is based on those studies of mostly workplace-driven communities of practice. And like the Army has a whole model focused on community of practices, communities of practice. And so, yeah, I can find those and send you the idea of community of practice, and then implementation, the implementation of programming, even kind of very broad-based programming like you're doing, at least in my grant experience, is usually framed in a different way. So.
Okay, great. Great.
Yeah, we're doing. Good.
Any last?
Thank you. I want to say thank you. Kate and Humberto, it's a big project. You've been at it for a long time, some years, right? And congratulations on coming up with product. It's always the hard part sometimes.
Thanks so much for your generosity and sharing your products and your process and all of that. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree. It's very, very useful. So we will, so thank you again, Humberto and Kate as well. And we'll be having further conversations about our next community of practice event in perhaps December or January. We'll see. So thanks a lot for all of your input. Great conversations. Really appreciate it. And we will see you on the next event.
Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you all.